interesting. We went into the FSC versus LCC almost as a sort of premonition to where we're going to go on this panel. We've got a number of subjects in the agenda here, and we're talking about the evolving partnership strategy, how to stay relevant in partnerships. Broadly speaking, the partnership model is interline, code share, SPA, alliance membership, joint venture. It's bilateral, it's multilateral, so it's all, it all sits under this big umbrella, and we tend to confuse things, I think, sometimes. When we talk about partnership, we're actually talking about a code share, but then we talk about it in the joint venture subject. So I'd ask today, we're talking about something, we're trying to be a bit specific. Are we referring to code share, are we referring to alliance? And when we refer to alliance, I think let's limit it to the 3 global alliances, rather than a multilateral partnership. We mean multilateral, we should say multilateral. So there's a lot of discussion about the decreasing importance of FSCs. So I think most of us would challenge that viewpoint. Certainly the LCCs have taken a lot of market share, but largely what they've done is grown the pie. Right? FSCs have continued to grow just their share of the market. Now, Dermot has shown that when it comes to seat capacity in Asia, LCCs are at about 60%, but when one switches it to ASKs, LCCs are still at 40-something%. And that's true worldwide, it's not just an Asia subject. When we go to revenue, LCCs have an even smaller component, they're closer to 30%. When we come to profits, depends on the region, sometimes they're 80% of the market, sometimes they're 20% of the market. So while LCCs have grown the market size, how do you see the partnership model going forward? We've seen full service airlines try to use partnerships to fight LCCs. Now we're seeing LCCs partner up to fight against full service carriers, and we're seeing full service carriers and LCCs partnering up. So sort of a very broad question. Why don't we start with Michael, because not only you come from Hong Kong Airlines, but some of your group airlines have now formed an LCC alliance, which we'll come to in a minute.
Yeah. So it is an interesting question. Yeah, we're one of the many Asian twin brand strategies, if you like, with Hong Kong Airlines and Hong Kong Express. Previously, we operated as essentially one airline, even though there were 2 AOCs for a number of years. Express was spun off to be strictly LCC about 3 years ago now. They've been growing at a very good rate. We, Hong Kong Airlines, have carried on very much in our own full service model and are now beginning to develop long-haul service going forward. So the question for us is, the Express management team are very strong believers in the pure LCC model, although that's changing already quite quickly, which is interesting. So the question is how we work together going forward, because there are only so many markets where we can operate independently. The question is how we operate, perhaps in the future, on the same market without cannibalizing each other, to get the true value of having a twin brand strategy. Otherwise, it's rather self-defeating. So we're looking to interline together this year, at some point this year. So already that pure LCC model I was talking about is perhaps being eroded, which is faster than you would probably normally see, and that's because Hong Kong is becoming an extremely full port, so they're having to grow revenues via other means, like other LCCs. So what's taken Ryanair 20, 25 years, already Express are up against those limitations after just 3 years. So that hybridization process is on fast forward for them somewhat. But coming back to us, so the question is how we work with an LCC partner to be mutually productive. So we will probably interline with them one way, and they won't interline with us the other way. So that opens up a lot of new markets for us. if we're able to sell it the right way, we can package it as a full service product, so the customer can get meal and bag as default. You know, if we interline with Express, then the customer automatically gets that product. So we don't see much downside there. So that's where we are as an airline. So
you're the one dual brand strategy.
Yeah.
Do you see, and then it sort of goes, well, let me ask Michael from Hawaiian, do you see that the partnership topic, which is primarily an FSC topic till now, is providing a competitive advantage to the FSCs?
Well, we don't have any relationships with an LCC. If you want to consider Virgin America in its early stages, they followed an LCC model in the sense that they did not interline bags nor accept tickets from other carriers. Hawaiian was actually the first carrier that they implemented an interline ticketing agreement, including bags, which was great in terms of providing a connection fee for our network in North America. But what we discovered was because Virgin did not have other interline agreements during an irregular operation, during a service recovery, they were unable to reprotect customers. So as a result, a lot of our customers were stranded in places like Dallas and Chicago with no alternatives, and it is something that we've had to manage with. So I think looking at the partnership model, I mean, I think, you know, for us, you know, we've had to look at various other carriers. JetBlue, as you mentioned earlier, same idea is that they've developed into a hybrid versus the LCC model, and clearly, you know, going after more premium traffic now with their Transcom product. But you know, I think you know, we do have partnerships. We do have code share with most of the major carriers that serve the islands.
Dermot, you mentioned you have overlapping LCCs in some of your routes. Does the fact that you do have partnerships provide you competitive advantage for some of your markets where if it's a head-to-head, point-to-point, of course not, but the fact that you do have partnerships, does it allow you to be stronger in your market versus LCCs?
I think it does, because I think the challenge for the LCCs is that complexity is the enemy of the LCC business. And as soon as you start talking about partnerships or connecting passengers, you begin to talk a language of delays, you begin to talk a language of cost, you begin to talk a language of challenges on aircraft utilization numbers and so on. So I think the jury is out on whether partnerships between LCCs will work, or indeed whether partnerships between LCCs and FSCs will work either. So in that sense, FSCs partnering with each other, and especially in our case, it gives us an opportunity to grow our footprint around the region and around the world. For sure, it gives us a significant advantage, I would say, versus the LCCs.
I guess the advantage full service airlines have is that you already have the infrastructure. You need to have the whole infrastructure for partnering, because code sharing, interline, SPAs, the alliance membership is part of your core business. So any incremental new partnership is simply leveraging an infrastructure you have. Scale. Looking at Lufthansa Group, I know you represent Swiss, but let's think of you as the wider. We're seeing an evolution where, you know, I live in Germany, and the German market LCCs have tried and failed. They've just not managed to get in. But in the last couple of years, Lufthansa has now decided that LCCs are a true threat. Give us some insight, if you can, of the Lufthansa Group's thinking and you working with Swiss. How do you think this affects you? You know, you've taken your short haul and moved it to an LCC brand, even though there isn't any real threat from LCCs in that market. What does it do for Swiss and for Swiss customers and Swiss frequent flyer passengers who now have to connect or travel sometimes on an LCC brand? Does it help you or weaken you?
Right, so I'll take that in two parts. First of all, in the short haul product of Lufthansa and Lufthansa Group, we haven't particularly moved it to an LCC model. So German Wings and Euro Wings is there. but that's not looking at our point-to-point traffic. So hub to hub, we still have Lufthansa, Swiss, Austrian, with a premium sort of full service product.
So everything that doesn't touch Frankfurt and Munich.
And Zurich and Vienna, exactly. So we're still focusing on that, and that's also helping us with our long-haul feeder traffic. From a short-haul perspective, when we look at non-hub traffic, clearly LCCs are a threat in Europe. It's been established by the Lufthansa Group. And what we have with Germanwings and Eurowings, I would say, is a bit of a hybrid model. So it's not your particular LCC. We try and bring a value proposition when it comes to in-flight product. But from a price point of view, we have to be competitive. But you made an interesting point. Being a full-service carrier, it completely helps us. So what we're also looking at now is Eurowings being part of a couple of our other partnerships with other FSCs. So yeah, clearly it does give us a competitive advantage on that side.
So the challenge there, and Michael, I think you've got the same challenge in Hong Kong Airlines Group, is where does the cost of all of this sit? Is the mainline carrier going to take all the cost of the infrastructure for interlining and frequent flyer partnerships and so on, all the IT-related costs as well? Or are you going to transfer some of these costs down to the LCC, which is actually causing some of it? I mean, the Lufthansa Group, the costs all sit in AG, they don't sit in Swiss, they don't sit in Lufthansa, they don't sit in Germanwings or Eurowings. What will happen in your group?
Yeah, well, so we are two very separate AOCs, so you know, the costs are very clearly defined. The uniqueness in our situation is Express, our sister airline, has just announced the first LCC alliance, so that changes things somewhat. So they've already incurred the cost of the technology investment to facilitate that alliance. So we are simply just plugging into that.
So that cost structure, because if I'm correct, those all the airlines in the alliance are HNA group carriers at the moment.
At the moment, yeah, but that's.
But the infrastructure cost is sitting in that alliance, not sitting with any of the mainline carriers.
Yeah.
Okay.
But cost, you know, if you want to get into detail, cost of missed baggage and misconnections would be invariably the full service carrier, of course.
Sure. Just to clarify when I'm talking about costs, some full service carriers allow passengers on their LCCs to accrue and redeem miles, to have lounge access, to have all these premium benefits. You know, does the LCC, whether it's a Jetstar or Germanwings, Eurowings, or you know, in the past the Tangos and so on, do they really take on that cost? Do they get their own lounges, or are they exploiting a Qantas lounge? I mean, I've never seen a Jetstar lounge. Right? That cost ends up sitting in Qantas. Jetstar doesn't get it.
I'm just going to go back to the previous point when you said costs sit primarily in Frankfurt, which is not true for us. So we have different AOCs and different P&Ls for each of the carrier. What does help, I guess, is the synergies between the brands, and that's where the infrastructure is.
Where's your interline cost? I mean, a Germanwings passenger who has Lufthansa status accesses a lounge. There are no Germanwings lounges. They're going to use a Lufthansa lounge, where the infrastructure of the Lufthansa lounge is paid for by Lufthansa.
In that sense, yes. But you were saying about the other carriers in the group, so that's what I wanted to say.
So, but it's the same thing. A HON member of Swiss.
Yeah, sure. That will sit with.
It sits on the mainland.
Yeah.
So
but shared by then the carriers as well.
So the full cost doesn't go to the LCC, which then makes the LCCs look more profitable than they are.
Well, in some way they have to, because they just can't afford to take on those costs. And again, that's where the competitive advantage of being with the full service. But with just an LCC, I think that's the difficult part for them. If they want to be in partnerships and alliances, it's just too difficult for them to attribute that to their cost structure right now, and that's why they're just sitting back right now.
But I think you're asking Dermot, should they? I mean, true LCCs, like, should they partner? Or is that just, in some LCC models, a flawed LCC?
Well,
I'm throwing it out there just as a...
No, let's put it this way. In my background, I lived with this very issue for a couple of years, because if you recall, in my Aer Lingus days, we had a couple of hostile takeovers from Ryanair. Ryanair wanted to create that partnership model. And it's kind of interesting looking back on it now, because in a sense, I think we saved Ryanair for themselves. Because I don't think it would have been a good idea for Ryanair to go down that route. What I know is that they looked at a long-haul operation themselves. When they began to see complexity, and there is tremendous complexity with long-haul, they could see that was the enemy of their model, and they, you know, quickly reeled in their horns. I suppose a second alternative bite of the cherry for them was to look at a possible equity combination with Aer Lingus, which, for all kinds of different reasons, didn't work in the end. So I guess my answer to your question is that the jury is out on whether partnership is a good long-term solution for LCCs.
Yeah.
Because no matter what you do, no matter how slick it is, no matter how well it works, it does introduce an element of complexity, and complexity almost invariably equals cost. For all the reasons you've just mentioned, because they don't have the sort of ground support that a full-service airline will have. So when things go wrong, or they're trying to provide added value benefits to passengers, it's a big, big challenge.
There's one model which I think works really well, is that Jetstar in Australia doesn't allow Jetstar to Jetstar interline. They don't allow Jetstar to Jetstar baggage transfer. But they will allow long haul hitting Australia and an interline and a baggage transfer onto Jetstar, because the passenger is forced to clear their bag anyway. So the airline actually doesn't take on the cost. The passenger would have to go through that whole process if they went Qantas to Qantas or Emirates to Qantas anyway. So if we allow them to go Emirates to Jetstar or Qantas to Jetstar, as long as the airline doesn't have to handle the bag or handle the passenger, simply all you're doing is through check-in of the ticket. But the passenger, the complexity is you transfer the cost to the passenger. Let them do the work, it works. There are very few markets in the world where that's possible. So if you hit Canada and you partner with WestJet, you have to self-handle your bag when you enter the country. If you hit the US, partner with Virgin America or JetBlue, you have to self-handle your bag. These models work, but in Asia it's difficult because we don't have that need. Let's switch topics a little bit over to the decreasing importance of alliances and the increasing importance of JVs. What I see is, and we talked about this a little bit earlier today, is lots and lots of airlines are overemphasizing both alliances and JVs, and they seem to be losing the plot on the basics. If you don't get the interlining working, you don't get the code sharing working properly. I mean, each of these was a step up the chain, right? Interline was basic, SPA was to make interline better, code share was to make SPA actually just to market better. Then came the alliances, which are just multilateral agreements. Then we made them more complicated. Now you have to go, when you remember your Star Alliance days, how much time would airline management have to spend going to Star Alliance meetings and not being at their own business? And then now we've hit the JVs. How many airlines are racing to alliance and racing to JV, not having done the basics? How many airlines are already in alliances and JVs and are forgetting the basics because the people who set all the basics up at some point want to retire? Michael, you've been through both camps, so.
Hawaiian is not a member of a global alliance brand. We partner with as many carriers that serve Hawaii. We are in a unique position because of our market share in the local market. We have 80% market share between, 85% market share between the islands. So anyone who flies to Hawaii wants to be a partner of Hawaiian. And so we have code shares with the 3 US legacy carriers. We have code shares with Asian carriers that are members of One World, of SkyTeam, of Star Alliance, which is great, which is great in terms of support for the neighbor island network. Where it does become a challenge is as Hawaiian expands globally to places like Australia, Japan, Korea, and China, the ability to work with those home country carriers is limited because we are a US flag carrier. Those home country carriers have exclusivity agreements with another US flag carrier, so it really does limit our ability to expand into the local market, into the regional market. So in that sense, it is a bit of an issue for us to be able to work on a bilateral basis with some of these other carriers. We do not have any JV agreements with anyone, and again, the ability to have a joint venture agreement with a carrier in those home country would require some type of a waiver from the dominant U.S. carrier, which of course is highly unlikely. And then of course some of these markets without open skies, because of the way the U.S. Operates, if we don't have open skies, if the U.S. doesn't have open skies with these home countries, it would be really difficult. There are clearly some advantages in terms of tapping into some distribution, particularly on a frequent flyer base, with some of these carriers. But as far as the business model for Hawaiian being a destination carrier, so far it hasn't worked.
I'm just going to take it from a different perspective, from a Lufthansa Group perspective. I think we've been fortunate enough to have started with the basics, founding members of the Star Alliance, which for us is still relevant and does help us a lot, and then also having some founding JVs. So we've got the basics in order first, and then sort of had an organic evolution in that sense. And yes, if you don't do it, and if you just start with the JV, it's quite difficult. And as we've seen from a big group perspective, the Atlantic joint venture we had, which started in about 2007 or 8, it took us a few years to get it going. But now it's the market leader on the North Atlantic. It's highly profitable for us, and not just for Lufthansa and the Atlantic partners, but also for Swiss and Austrian that joined in. So clearly, if you get the basics right and slowly build it up, it definitely helps the big picture.
One of the challenges with joint ventures, and when United and Continental merged, the first year after the merger, there was an absolute disaster because the Continental people had taken over, and they announced in their annual results that they realized they didn't know how to do JV, because as they'd taken over and all the United people left, there was, if I remember correctly, there was about a $10 million write-down, because they had misunderstood A++. And by misunderstanding how to do the JV, they brought basically an alliance or multilateral partnership mentality. And one of the challenges in partnerships is it's not all about just making everybody profitable. Even within every partnership, you're competing. So within Star Alliance, all the Star carriers compete. Within the joint venture, there's some pooling and some degree of competition. And so I only quote that one because United came out publicly and said, if you don't do this right, so it's not automatic. You don't just sign up these agreements, set up a joint venture, and the money rolls in. You don't just revenue pool. You actually have to know how to do it, how to exercise, how to fair file, how to ticket, how to control which passengers get booked on which itineraries, because there are rules around how which tickets will get allocated to the revenue pool and which won't. So you as an airline also try to play the tricks to figure out, if I sell that ticket that way, I'm going to have to share revenue to the revenue pool. If I sell it a different way, I won't have to. So how do I get around some of those rules? The challenges I see, even as sophisticated as Lufthansa Group is, some of the partners you're trying to do deals with aren't. They're new to this game. They haven't quite mastered code-share yet. What kind of challenges does that present? Because you can't go and show them the whole roadmap, because you're also giving away some of your IP.